Good afternoon, and good morning to my colleagues and friends in Europe. It is indeed my pleasure to address new forms of designs in my presentation, to address how these are protected under the current regime, which, as mentioned by Adriana, was conceptualized more than 3 decades ago. So this is long before the first smartphone entered the market in 2007. And therefore, the protection of new forms of designs, including animation, poses challenges to the current EU system as it does on a global basis. As mentioned by Director General Hang in her introductory remarks, some systems have already adapted their legislation to cater for these new forms of design, but the European Union has not yet, and it is indeed also one of the principal aims of the legal reform in the European Union to adapt our design acquis to the digital age. And this applies in particular to the question, what constitutes a design, and also to the graphical representation regime of designs. And these are 2 points I would like to address in my presentation, which I'm going to shorten a little bit due to time reasons. Next slide, please. So here we see some examples, and it is interesting to note that Director General Hong indeed has mentioned, I believe, almost all of them in her introductory remark, what is typically discussed under the topic of new forms of designs, which are also sometimes called digital designs or by other terms. So here we see examples. On the left-hand side, what is currently the most popular forms, at least in terms of what we find in our register in the European Union, and that is icons and displays. Now, under the European Union system, icons correspond to graphics. So the current legal regime has no issues in catering in protecting them as graphical designs. The same applies to displays, and both together form what is often called graphical user interfaces, allowing humans to interact with machines, at least on a visual level. Of course, the interaction with machines is also can be governed by the voice. It can be governed by the touch, by the vibration. But these are, of course, aspects, senses, which are not addressed in the EU design system, which, as Peter has mentioned, of course, only protects the visual level, the visual appearance of our products. Moving to the right side, the other examples, this is the more fancy ones, the ones that we would like to see more entering into our registers and which are usually discussed when addressing new forms of designs, projected images, holographics, and virtual spaces. And all of this may be classified as virtual designs. Next slide, please. So here we see a basic categorization of these examples that I have indicated beforehand, namely the graphical user interfaces, i.e. icons and displays, and what may be summarized under the fanciful term of virtual reality, where the future potentially lies, of course. As I have mentioned, graphical user interfaces are already very popular in the European Union, and indeed worldwide, when considering, for instance, the applications via the Hague system, the international registrations, when considering the respective Locarno class, where graphical user interfaces are classified, namely class 14 and in addition class 32. This is the #1 class for international design registration, reflecting how important they are already. Also for the European Union, we have seen an exponential growth in the recent years in these classes in applying for graphical user interfaces. On the other hand, for virtual reality designs, I am afraid I cannot present any proper examples because we hardly see any registrations yet based on the current legislative regime. And there may be various reasons. Of course, whilst it is a hot topic, virtual reality, it has not entered into our day-to-day life yet. As I have mentioned, the formal representation regime, at least as far as the European Union are concerned, for a design, what is represented in our register, is not suitable to show holographs, to show a virtual three-dimensional space. And last but not least, based on the current regime, we may also speculate that there is, in the respective industries, a lack of awareness on the accessibility of design protection in this area. We can see this, for instance, for the video gaming industry, which is also very important in the European Union. And we see some design applications from the video game industry protecting certain images, certain avatars, and so on, but not really protecting the virtual environment in which a video game takes place. The same potential we may see with respect to online shopping, mostly done, if I take as an example, Amazon in a still old-fashioned way. So we do not see any applications yet. For this, we will need the legal reform where the user can enter into a virtual shopping mall and go around with his avatar and being dressed and so on. So this is still a future talk. It is becoming more popular, of course, because of the metaverse, which is now on vogue. And this is, of course, a space, a virtual reality space, for which design protection may be well suited in the future. Next slide, please. So all of what I have described may also be coined as virtual migration. No, the three-dimensional product design, the traditional notion of what a product is, a design is, namely a physical product, moves into the graphical side, moves into a virtual reality. This goes hand in hand with the fact that designs are no longer physical embodied. And this also goes hand in hand with the fact that designs become potentially animated. And in fact, as far as graphical user interfaces are concerned, the interaction between machine and the user may also have an underlying animation. And this is really where intellectual property protection may be well suited to protect innovation in this regard. So now I'm briefly addressing all these 3 points in the next slides, please. So here we see an essential characterization of designs, which is not reflected in the European Union law, but is a concept designers often follow. Namely, we have the category of product designs, in this case, the smartphone. We have graphical designs, which protect the design as a graphic as such, regardless of the physical embodiment. And then we have a third category, which we will address later on. This is the space. And this is needed, of course, for protecting the virtual reality designs as far as we talk about a space. Maybe I can say a few more words on graphical designs, because this is where jurisdictions on the globe differentiate a little bit. Under the EU system, graphics can be protected as such. They do not necessarily need to be registered as applied to a certain product. So this marks a distinction of the EU system to other systems. I had a look in preparation also to the systems in Taiwan, to the English translation of the design provisions, and I have found that under the Taiwanese systems, generated icons and graphical user interface are expressly acknowledged as designs, and then it continues applied to an article. So this is maybe something we can discuss later on. For my understanding also, maybe this indicates that for the protection under the Taiwanese system, the design needs to be applied to an article. This would not hold true for the European Union system, where, as I have said, the graphic is protected as such. Next slide, please. So this is the other point I wanted to highlight, which are also characteristics of the EU design system allowing for protection of new forms of design. That is the protection for partial designs. So again, we can protect the icon, the graphical user interface as such. It does not need to be displayed on a device. And the second point, which is very important also in this regard, is that the design protection for the registered design applies regardless of the product indication. So the indication of the product in the register does not limit the scope of protection. So that is to say, if a design is protected for a real-world car, for instance, the design as such, the visual appearance of a car is protected. And therefore, it is equally protected as a virtual car. For instance, the same car design appearing in a computer game. So this is another characteristic of the EU system, where on a global basis, jurisdictions do not necessarily have the same solution. Next slide, please. And then this is the other, of course, very exciting feature when we talk about new forms of designs. To what extent are fluid features, animation, interaction, to what extent does it form part of the subject matter of protection? So here, as I have said, in the absence of many registrations in this respect, we have not a fully developed practice or jurisprudence from the courts yet. So it is not clarified yet what exactly is a subject matter of protection. But what is clear already is, of course, that the animation as such forms part of the overall impression of the design. And what is also clear is that the design is not protected in these various standstills. So when you think about an animation, a design can also be entirely transformative if it is a cartoon character which may be transformed from a lion into a zebra. Just a stupid example. Then the lion looks completely, the lion in the beginning looks completely different than the zebra in the end. And the protection is not for these two separately. This is also clear when we talk about the subject matter of protection of animated designs. And then the formal representation requirements. And this is, as I have said, this is at the moment the limiting factor for the appropriate depiction of the subject matter of protection. Next slide, please. Here we can see the current EU regime, and as mentioned by Adriana, the representation of the designs in the EU, at least on EU level, is limited to a maximum of 7 static views, which can also be used to represent animation, as you can see here, by means of a registered EU design, but it is very, very limited. So therefore, we do not have appropriate design protection yet. We will, here I am confident to say, see a revision of this, and it is imaginable, remains to be seen, of course, that as for motion trademarks or multimedia trademarks, it may be possible in the future to file videos of designs. And there, of course, as far as the subject matter of protection is concerned, then the question will arise, how long can a video be? Can you file a 10-minute video of a video game? Is that still a design, or is it rather something to be protected by copyright, equal to an audiovisual work? So these are the still open questions. which will need to be addressed also in the legal reform. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And with my last two slides, I just would like to point you towards some studies. I believe you have a printout, so you can. I'm not going to enter into them now. Just for your explanation, ID5. This is a study from 5 intellectual property offices amongst the EUIPO, which is exactly addressing this topic of new technological designs. It is already a few years old, but still valid. And then, as you will know, of course, this topic is also discussed at WIPO level. There are various questionnaires, various reports, and also we see joint recommendations how to address the new forms of designs. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion later on.